Now let's talk a little bit about consistency with communication, right? So it's really important to, and this is something that honestly, until fairly recently, I hadn't thought about, but consistency in communication is important. I think I can think a lot of time, I can think of a lot of situations in my life where consistency has been, it's super important, right? It's important when you're talking about your health and fitness. It's important when you talk about sleep. It's important in relationships because it kind of gives you that credibility or the benefit of the doubt, right? So if you are consistent in how you respond to bad news, or you're consistent in how you um, address things when you're angry, or how you settle arguments, then you get the benefit of the doubt with people. I also wonder if, when you're talking about, I'm sorry, Corey, can you do the minutes instead of the time?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Um, when we are talking about how we communicate with people, if you are just, if people know what to expect from you, they know how you're going to respond to bad news, if they know what's going to set you off the handle versus what won't set you off, then it's much easier for, from a communication standpoint, right? So I'm trying to think of a really good example for you, and I apologize. If you are a calm person and you very rarely raise your voice, you very rarely yell. When something happens and you yell or you raise your voice, people are going to notice and they're going to respond differently. So if you're hot and cold and you're running off the rails and people never know what's going on with you, then it's really hard to develop strong communications with your employees or your customers, because they don't know what to expect, and so they never really know what angle you're coming from. It's also important that when you are communicating with people, like, being passive aggressive is super challenging for people that are on the receiving end of it, because there's no consistency to it. Sometimes you're just really calm, other times you're just passive, and then other times you're aggressive, and you can't, it's unpredictable and it's impossible to deal with. So if you manage people and you are passive aggressive, you are making your employees' lives hell. And that you just need to step back and figure out why you're doing that and how you can stop doing that in the future. One of the best ways to get an assessment on your communication style is ask your employees, ask your spouse, ask your friends, ask family, just ask people, how am I with communicating? But don't beat them up if they tell you information that you don't want to hear. Perfect example, communication, and this is verbal communication, right? I started this tonight by saying way too much, and I saw a little message pop up that quickly said, "You're using a lot." I stopped, but it was great, effective feedback for me, and I needed it. So don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Don't get mad when you get it, and find ways to act on it. Okay, let's see. I'm looking at my notes here really quick to see what else I need to cover. Talked about the consistency in tone, consistency in how you communicate, transparency. So, from a transparency perspective, this is one of the areas that leaders get really tripped up on. So, you own a company, and I think we automatically put the burden on ourselves that we're supposed to know everything, and that we can't say, I don't know, or that we can't say, I can't answer that question right now. If you can develop the habit of having transparent communications with your employees, with your customers, with your friends and family, people know that will grow to understand that when you're communicating with them, that you're being honest, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. And there are a lot of situations when you just can't give the answer. So, Corey and I both have spent, years working in the M&A space, mergers and acquisitions. And there's a lot of times when you don't know the information, or as a leader, you can't give the answer because it hasn't been disclosed yet. And to lie and say like, not answer it or to ignore the question, it ruins your credibility. So you have to come at it from the perspective, or you should come at it from the perspective of, I don't know the answer to that right now, but as soon as I do, I'm going to circle back. Or I can't answer that right now, but as soon as I can, I will circle back. Those answers are perfectly acceptable and employees they will love hearing that. There's also something to be said about intention, right? So I don't know how many of you listen to our podcast. I don't know how many of you know we have a podcast, but we have this great podcast called Biz Quick. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a guest on there by the name of Scott Miller, and he talked about intention. So when you are communicating, to express your intention beforehand opens up so many doors for you in terms of how the person you're communicating with is going to respond to that. So my intention of this conversation, Corey, is not to hurt your feelings, but I need to understand why X. I don't have anything to say there. But if I did, I would just say it, right? And so now Corey knows going in what my intention is. And we can have a really effective communication, a really effective conversation about it. So intention, speaking that up front is super helpful. It is a really easy way to start difficult conversations. I always like to say, when I'm going to say something that's hard to somebody, right? And it's happened with certainly at least one person that's on this call tonight, where I've said, look, I need to talk to you about something, and I'm probably not going to get the words right the first time, but I'm going to say it. And if you're confused or it doesn't land right, then ask me questions and I'm going to take another shot at it. And that it makes it easy for them to know, like, well, this must be a hard conversation. And also this might, this isn't, the intention here is to help me, not to hurt me, but the words might not come out correctly. So just keep that in mind. That's a great strategy that I love to use, and because sometimes it's hard to find the right words, and sometimes it's hard to give people difficult feedback. So to be able to do that is it's a gift to give people that feedback, and it also helps you to be able to say the tough things. Okay. I am all right. Sorry, everybody. So typically, if someone was going to be talking about communication, you'd hear them talking about verbal, nonverbal, written, blah, 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 all those things, right? And they're key and they're important. I say super way too much, you guys. I'm so aware of it. They're important. Social media, you're communicating through, just bits and bytes of information and images and videos, and everything we're doing is a method of communication, especially right now when we're all, home much more and communicating through Zoom or leveraging social media more and more. So just be aware of how you're using your words and how they might be interpreted by people, and what information you really want somebody to take away from your communications. This probably the single best piece of advice that I could give with respect to communication and with your business. It's important that you are controlling how you're communicating and that you're controlling what the message is that people are receiving about it. I have a couple of book recommendations that I want to give to you guys with respect to communication. I know a lot of you don't have don't have a lot of time, but the three books that are my favorite with respect to communication are Radical Candor, Fierce Conversations, and Just Listen. They're three really good books that are worth the time to either listen to or to take the time to read and dog ear and highlight the crap out of those books. The last thing I'm going to say is about establishing boundaries with respect to communication. And this is going to be quick. But as the leader of company of your small businesses, it's important that you have boundaries with your employees on what it is that they can and cannot give you where they can and cannot give you their advice or tell you what to do, right? So if you own a business and you are unsure of how to proceed with something and you ask your employees for advice, that's fantastic. They'll give it to you if they have it. But if you don't want it, you need to establish those boundaries really early on when you're working with people on where they can and can't insert themselves into that business. And that comes with communication and being consistent. So make sure that you are clear with everybody what it is that you're willing to take feedback on and what you're not.